We are the Group 3, and our topic is all about bar graph. But before that, let me introduce the members and leader of this group first. The leader, we have Althea Marie Albarracin, followed by its members, Karel Faye F. Bacaltos, Francis Claire M. Saniza, Sheila May G. Kukuban, Jolyn Rain H. Honorado, Hyacinth Jane M. Maturan, Jen Gabriel Hugh Navarro, Urim Earl C. Presbitero, Crystal M. Rilampago, Chanel R. Puno, and Christina Alexa O. Cisaldo. So that's all for its members and leader. Now let's move our focus on what is a bar graph all about. Introduction to this topic, a bar graph is a graphical representation of information. It uses bars that extend to different heights to depict value. The vertical axis on the left or right side of a bar graph is called the y-axis, and the horizontal axis at the bottom of a bar graph is called the x-axis. The height or length of the bars represents the value of the data, and the value corresponds to levels on the y-axis. Levels are plotted on one chart axis, and the values are plotted on the other axis. Each categorical value claims one bar, and the length of each bar corresponds to the bar's value. Bar chart is most commonly used when you want to show a distribution of data points or perform a comparison of metric values across different subgroups of your data. From a bar chart, we can see which groups are highest or most common and how other groups compare against the others. So the objectives in this topic describes the features and benefits of bar graphs, identify and define types of bar graphs, explain uses of bar graphs, understanding bar graphs and applying data, and convey relational information quickly in a visual manner.
The bar chart or bar graph, as some may call it, has been a beacon of simplicity and clarity in data visualization for centuries. Notwithstanding with its simple demeanor, the bar chart has an intriguing history. The earliest known use of the bar chart dates back to the 14th century. It was a chart depicting the fluctuating prices of wheat, displaying variations over a span of time. The conventional horizontal layout was utilized, and by varying the length of bars, the information was clearly presented. The advent of modern times brings us William Playfair, an engineer, economist, and pioneer of graphical methods of statistics. He is widely regarded in the annals of statistical history for introducing the bar chart to the world in the late 18th century. Alongside bar chart, he is also credited with the invention of line and pie charts.
Bar charts serve as a fundamental visualization method particularly adept at illustrating categorical variables, discrete variables, or continuous variables bent into class intervals. This graphical representation boosts a straightforward design, compromising an axis which can be oriented horizontally or vertically against which a series of labeled bars are juxtaposed. Each bar within the chart serves as a visual representation encapsulating either the frequencies of distinct values about the variable under the scrutiny or directly portraying the range of values themselves. With their simplicity and clarity, bar charts serve as an indispensable tools for conveying data patterns, facilitating comparisons, and aiding in the interpretation of trends across diverse databases.
The importance and uses of a bar graph. So today we are diving into the significance and versatility of bar graph. Bar graph is very useful in some certain things, specifically in understanding data. So bar graphs simplify complex data into easily digestible visuals. They are like storytellers, helping us understand information at a glance. Next is bar graph as a communication tool. So bar graphs are powerful communicators, whether it's sales data, population trends, or survey results. They make information accessible to everyone. Next is bar graph for comparison and analysis. With bar graphs, we can compare and analyze data effortlessly. By spotting trends and patterns, we gain valuable insights for decision making. Next is bar graphs for decision making. In various fields, bar graphs guide decision making processes. They provide clarity and context, empowering stakeholders to make informed choices. Next is bar graph as a presentation aid. When presenting insights, bar graphs steal the spotlight. Their visual appeal captivates audiences and enhances understanding. So in conclusion, bar graphs are more than just lines and bars. They are essential tools in our data-driven world. So let's embrace their power and unleash our potential.
Now let's delve into the definition of terms of the elements of a bar graph, starting with your bars. So what are bars? So these bars are rectangular. These varies in length, representing the data values. So the height or length of each bar corresponds to the value it represents. Second are your x-axis or the horizontal axis of a graph. So these typically represents categories, groups, or intervals of data. Third are your y-axis or the vertical axis of a graph. So these represents the scale of measurement or numerical values. Number 4 is your title. So this is a descriptive title that summarizes the information being presented in the graph. Fifth are your labels. So labels on both x and y axis indicates the categories or values being presented. Number 6 are your scale. So these can be numeric or categorical scale along the axis to help interpret the data accurately. Number 7, the legend, if applicable. A legend may be included if there are multiple groups or categories being represented in the graph, explaining what each color or pattern represents. Lastly are your grid lines. So this is optional. So horizontal and vertical lines extending from the axis to aid in reading the values of the bars.
There are 4 different types of bar graphs. The first one is a vertical bar graph. It is the most common type of bar graph and is also referred to as a column graph. Here, the bars are drawn vertically on the x-axis from bottom to top. In the example, the data categories or the colors green, blue, and red are placed on the x-axis, while the numerical values or the number of children are on the y-axis. The second type of bar graph is the horizontal bar graph. This is opposite to the vertical bar graph since the bars are drawn horizontally on the y-axis, from left to right. Here in our example, the data categories or the colors green, blue, and red are placed on the y-axis, while the numerical values or the number of children are on the x-axis. This type of bar graph is used when there are many inputs or when titles of data categories are too long for a vertical display. Next is the grouped bar graph. This is also known as the clustered bar graph. Here, the bars are grouped by position for levels of one categorical variable with colors indicating the secondary category level within each group. In our example, the first category is the grade level, while the second category are the colors blue, green, purple, and red. The variables are displayed beside one another. This type of bar graph allows for comparison of variables within each group while also comparing several groups. Like for example, blue is the least favorite color among grade 1 students, while it is also the most favorite color among grade 3 students. This bar graph can be shown both horizontally or vertically. And lastly, we have stacked bar graph. This is also called as the composite bar graph. This bar graph shows a whole in its different parts or segments stacked on top of one another at once. Each part or segment is represented using different colors. One special characteristic of stacked bar graph is that it can have 2 numerical axes and 1 category axis. Like grouped bar graphs, this is also used to compare categories and allows comparison of data within each category to show rankings. This is also represented both horizontally and vertically.
Let's talk about the steps and procedures. First step, collect data. Choose the information that you would like your bar graph to display. This might be anything from specific data to survey results. Second, choose categories. Choose the labels or categories that will apply to your data. This will be displayed on your bar chart's x-axis. Third, determine scale. Decide on the scale of the y-axis and the x-axis. Make sure the scales make sense of your data and is simple to understand. Fourth, draw axes. In your graph paper or graphic projects, draw the x and y axis, indicate the categories and associated values on the axis. Fifth, draw bars. Draw a bar for each category with a height corresponding to the category's value. The x-axis should be equal spacing between the bars. Sixth, label the bars. If needed, mark each bar with precise value for clarity. 7th, title and label. Give your bar chart a title that conveys the information it shows. Give the x and y axis the proper labels. 8. Color or shade bars. If you have many sets of data, you may use different colors or hues to make the bars stand out from one another. 9. Review and finalize. Make sure your bar chart is accurate and clear by reviewing it. To make the presentation better, add whatever extras or modifications are acquired. And last, interpretation. When your bar chart is finished, evaluate the data by comparing the bar heights to the axis scale and each other. Based on the patterns or trends you see in inferences.
Now, we will dive deeper about bar graphs by exploring a practical example that will shed light on their importance and application. So, for the first example problem, we have here a scenario. A hospital ward is implementing a new pain management protocol for post-operative patients. To evaluate its effectiveness and identify improvement areas, the nurses wants to assess patient satisfaction with pain control. So the problem here is how satisfied are post-operative patients on the ward with the current pain management protocol. So for the gathering of the data, a survey was conducted among 30 post-operative patients who underwent similar surgeries. The survey used a standardized pain satisfaction scale from 1 as very dissatisfied to 5 as very satisfied. So here are the results. As you can see in the table, 2 patients reported being very dissatisfied. 4 were dissatisfied and 8 felt neutral. 12 were satisfied and another 4 were very satisfied. So to better understand the distribution of patient satisfaction, a bar graph was created. As you can see in the graph, the x-axis represents the pain management satisfaction level, while the y-axis shows the number of patients. The graph provides a visual snapshot of how patients rated their satisfaction. The majority, 12 patients, reported satisfaction at level 4. 8 patients indicated neutral satisfaction at level 3. Moving down the scale, 4 patients reported dissatisfaction at level 2 and 2 patients at level 1. On the positive end, 4 patients expressed very high satisfaction at level 5. In analyzing the bar graph, it is evident that the protocol is generally well received with a peak at level 4 satisfaction. However, it is essential to consider the variations and the smaller number of patients on the extreme ends of the satisfaction spectrum.
So here's another example. This is example problem number 2, and the scenario here is a hospital monitors the number of patients discharged by unit over 1 week. So here's the problem. First, create a bar chart to represent the number of patients discharged by unit for the week. Second, analyze the results and identify the unit with the highest to lowest number of discharges. So, the table shows the data, the number of patients discharges by unit over a week or over 1 week. So you can see here the highest number of discharge over a week is the unit of emergency department. So, solution. First, create the bar chart. Draw 2 axes. The first axis is the vertical axis that will represent the hospital unit, which are the pediatrics, the emergency department, the maternity, and the surgery. While the horizontal axis represent the number of patients discharged. So number 2, analyze the results. Look at the bars. The highest bar will correspond to the unit with the most discharges, and then identify the unit with the highest to lowest bars. So, interpretation or the answer of the problem. By analyzing the chart, you can identify the unit with the highest and lowest number of discharges. During the week, this information can be helpful of staffing purposes and resources allocation within the hospitals.
Hello everyone, I'm Yerm El Presbitero and I'll be the one to report the sample problem number 3 for the bar graphs. So here are our sample scenario. Coronavirus infection has now reached its lowest peak of infection because of the rise of the ongoing COVID-19 vaccination. However, Nurse Anna, who is a community health nurse, still would like to assess district access for neighboring barangays if there were still people that did not receive any vaccination. The problem for this case is that how would Nurse Anna be able to identify if there were certain people that are unvaccinated, and the data will be used for her case study. And then what she did is that she surveyed 60 random individuals in total in those 4 neighboring barangays in District X and made a bar graph and analysis to those data that she gathered. So first, she labeled the x-axis with the term barangays, which are namely Barangay Riverage, Barangay Busay, Barangay Capitol, and Barangay Garin. And then on the y-axis are the representation of values of the total population of unvaccinated individuals in each barangays, which are labeled from 0 to 60. And then she also labeled the barangays on the lowermost part, and then the number of unvaccinated individuals on the leftmost part, which is the y-axis, which is increasing by 10. And here are the results or data gathered from the data from people she have gathered. First, the Barangay Riverage, which garnered 10 people who answered they were still unvaccinated, and then 30 from the Barangay Busay, 10 from the Barangay Capitol, and 10 also from the Barangay Garing, which indicates that there were still people who did not receive the COVID-19 vaccination. So lastly, she labeled the title for this bar graph she made, the barangay with most unvaccinated individuals in District X. And then lastly, she called her the bar graph according to the legends that are given. Next is the analysis for this sample problems. The yellow colored bar showed the highest number of barangays with unvaccinated individuals, and the rest fell equal to each other, which indicates that there were still people who were unvaccinated in those areas, even though there is an ongoing COVID-19 vaccination. And then the interpretation is that among the 4 neighboring barangays, Nurse Anna was able to get that Barangay Busay has the most unvaccinated individuals, garnering 30 people who were still unvaccinated. So that is all for my report.
And with that, in conclusion, a bar chart or a bar graph is a graphical representation that presents data. Categorical data using rectangular bars where each length or height of each bar corresponds to the value of each certain category. They are powerful tools for visualizing and comparing data across different categories, since they provide a clear and concise way to interpret information and identify patterns or trends. It is very much versatile, easy to interpret, and suitable for comparing discrete categories. Needless to say, it is the simplest and most straightforward way to compare various categories. But when compared to other graphs or charts, as the bar chart excels in providing clear comparison among discrete categories, they unfortunately have a limited scope in displaying multivariate data, as they can only display 1 or 2 variables at a time, as we can observe from seeing bar graphs from time to time, and can be misleading if not scaled appropriately.